I don't follow British politics too much. We've been talking about it over the past couple of weeks a little bit. A couple of our listeners were giving us updates from Great Britain. One of whom was running for on the Green Party for a local election, and what we heard over the past couple of weeks was this thing is neck and neck between essentially the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And it turns out that the Liberal Democrats, which is sort of like, I don't know, the Lincoln Chafee Party?
Yeah, they're the third kind of party in the middle. They have three legitimate parties there. The way when I was over there,
now they have a fourth, apparently.
Well, that's a good point, too. Back then, when the Liberal Democrats were kind of like a populist party, they were more socially conservative and economically populist. But I don't know if that is their current identity as much as it was when I was over there, which was 20 years ago now, because I'm getting old. So,
well, the Liberal Democrats, they essentially just completely collapsed. And this was Nick Clegg's party. And he has since, I guess, resigned from the leadership. Ed Miliband, I guess now former leader of the Labour Party, has also resigned because Labour, and the thing that I keep hearing from people is who were more invested, I guess, directly into this election, was that they're pissed that Labour was so inept. And part of the problem, I guess, with Labour was that their stance on Scottish independence, and they got wiped out in Scotland, and the Scottish National Party basically took up all their seats. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think they had 65 seats that the Scottish National Party now has. They are now the third largest party in Parliament. Here it is.
Yeah, that's impressive.
So,
they got the Labour Party. This will remind you of some things that happened over here with New Democrats. Can sometimes get on the wrong side of populism because they become too wishy-washy and don't end up standing for anything.
Well, that's right. The SNP ran strong against austerity. Labour was a little bit mishmashy on. But they were soft.
Let's call it third way-ish.
Right.
That stuff may have worked when the left was sort of beaten down for a whole host of reasons in the 90s. You had your Bill Clintons and Tony Blairs, and Bill Clinton and Tony Blair were also pretty uniquely charismatic figures. But this has been a problem in recent years for Labor, much as the Democrats have had to rediscover their progressive roots in this country, which is that this mishmash of policies is sort of, I'm not going to stand up strongly for anything. I'm just going to kind of split the difference. It doesn't inspire people. But you know what does? Like the Scottish National Party coming out strongly on issues, letting people know where they stand, and that as we know works.
So the SNP won 56 of 59 seats in Scotland. Apparently, from what I've read, I don't know if this is the case, but and again, I'm not by any means. All I'm relating is what I've read in various sources. Is that there was concern on the British right and center that a SNP and Labour coalition would push the country too far to the left. I mean, essentially what we're looking at is there was no one apparently who, broadly speaking in the country, no party that was strongly pointing out that austerity is a problem. And that, and look, we saw that dynamic in this country too, didn't we? I mean, in 2010,
we just saw it in 2010, and then we saw it again in 2014. I mean, the things that look so similar here when you read this and you say, that there was no clear. I mean, we see some of the left wing critiques in England. There was no clear narrative coming out of Labour about what they would do for their natural base, which is poor folks who are unemployed and those who are having problems in the middle class there. You see a lot of the same stuff written that you saw written about Democrats in off-year elections here, and it's probably largely true in the same way.
You can't, I mean, we saw this with President Obama in 2010, sort of pivoting to sort of embrace austerity as opposed to sort of making creating a narrative and explaining to people why this was problematic at this time. And when you leave it out there, even though that he may have pivoted years later, the table had been set and that die had been cast, and there was not enough effort to sort of break that mold, I guess, that narrative that was taken. So ultimately, conservatives have won probably either 330 or 331 of 650 seats in the House of Commons. That's a gain of 24 seats from 2010. The UKIP, the UK Independence Party, which is virulently anti-European Union and anti-immigration, they only picked up one seat. However, there's going to be a lot of pressure, apparently, for the conservatives to either to basically leave the European Union or to sort of negotiate a deal that is impossible to negotiate with the European Union. And so that's going to be interesting to see. And you're also going to see the pressure of another referendum for Scottish independence. So,
right,
we'll see what happens over there. But there is, sort of an emerging lesson, I think, that both about polling's not terribly good apparently in many of the countries whose elections we follow. A, and B, that people are not going to vote for nothing over something, even if that something that is not necessarily something they love. That's what it seems to me.
And, psychologists can tell you that about how we all react to people who are kind of unsure of themselves versus those that are. I mean, it's leadership, really. So I'm not surprised by that at all. It seems like in politics we always learn everything much later than everything else. But, yeah, that's an important narrative. When you're talking about polling, that's interesting, too. Obviously how people get their information is changing, but also people who, we've talked about this before, there's a large segment of society, and obviously it's different over there to a certain degree, but, mobile phone usage versus home and who you're reaching with your surveys. And I don't know. I don't know enough to know if that's those kind of dynamics are affecting things over there as they have over here. But I guess that'll be for pollsters to figure out how to do something that actually has significance to it so we can trust it.
It gives us something for Nate Silver to do, right? I mean, I guess
on
some
Nate
level.
Silver's
Although he's not a pollster. He just uses polls. And so he can't do his job, apparently, if the pollsters aren't doing theirs.